Everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the Old Scribes podcast. We have a special guest with us today, Calvin Watkins, the president of the Pro Football Writers Association. Calvin, how you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. You guys all right?
We're good, good. Also want to introduce my co-host, Matthew Aguilar, part of the Borderland Boys. And we had Calvin on. Very happy to have him on today because of what seems to be going on in the world of covering the NFL. The Players Association issued a statement about media interviews in the locker room and the fact that they say the interviews in the locker room are now invading their privacy and they actually don't want to have any more interviews conducted in the locker room. They say they are willing to have players go to a designated area, but they no longer want interviews conducted in the locker room, which is according to the current NFL media policy. So we're glad to have Calvin on to see what the reaction is from the Pro Football Writers Association about what's going on and how they feel about it.
Well, here's the deal. The players don't want us in the locker room anymore, right? That's just the bottom line. However, the players cite that there are privacy issues as the reason why they want us out of the locker room. They're not comfortable getting dressed with reporters in the locker room during the week and after games. There are rules in place to provide privacy for players as they get dressed. Shirts and shorts are supposed to be provided for players at their locker stalls after they get out of the shower. The shower area is supposed to be covered. When they get to their locker stall, they're supposed to, if they want to request it, they can have a curtain put at their stall so they can get dressed in private. And it's in the policy, if a player wants to speak outside the locker room, that's his right, and we're supposed to honor that. So a lot of the things that the players are asking for is already in the policy. They're not asking for anything new. I think a large percentage of the players didn't know about these rules. But the bottom line is they want us out of the locker room totally. The league, meaning the National Football League, does not want us out of the locker room. They want us in the locker room. I believe this is a issue that can be solved pretty quickly. The players going about it can only promote aggravation. It can create hostility between the players and the media, and that's something we don't want. If anything, we should be working together so everyone is comfortable in the locker room. And those of us who have been in locker rooms, whether it's the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, hockey, doesn't even matter what it is, we don't want to be talking to butt-naked people, right? We want to talk to people who are fully clothed. Now, those of us who have been around a long time, and all three of us have been around a long time, have talked to players butt naked before. It's just how it is. But now more and more players are against that, and I think we all can respect that. So there are rules in place to protect players from speaking to reporters in the nude. So what the players are trying to do is nothing new. As I said, the rules are in place for them to have privacy.
And I think, when I look back on my career, when I first started in the late 80s, we had, and early 90s, we had basically unlimited access. We would be in the locker room before practice, after practice, and could remain in the locker room until the last player dressed and the lights were turned off. That changed to, what evolved into a 45-minute session where reporters were allowed into the locker room. And by that time, it became a system where the quarterback might talk on Wednesday and the top running back might talk on Thursday and the top defensive player might talk on Friday. And there were podiums set up within the locker rooms where these people could speak. But you also had access to players who were getting dressed or hanging out or whatever they might be doing, and you might walk over to them and have a conversation. It might not even be related to football. You might talk about their families or what they got going on, or you might, give them some razzing about their college school, which lost the Saturday before. And all this was part of developing relationships so that when things do happen, there's an avenue of communication and an avenue of trust between the media person and the player. And but now you've got these 5 minutes with this guy and 5 minutes with that guy, and groups of reporters running in packs from one to another. You never really get anything that's good out of that or exclusive. And I think now you're getting to the point where they don't want you in the locker room at all.
Mm-hmm.
uh, that makes it very difficult for people to do their job. I know there was an incident earlier in the year where there was a reporter who actually was filming a player being interviewed, and in the background there was a player nude changing, and that's probably the source of some of this.
Yeah. As the president of Pro Football Writers, we had a discussion with the NFLPA before the season about the locker room. And I made it very clear, we're not leaving the locker room. We're here. We're not going anywhere. There's nothing to talk about. There are rules in place for your privacy. And I thought that it was over. The conversation was over. But in San Francisco, a talk show host who has a talk show once a week, an hour a day, as an hour-long talk show, 5 days a week. He was shooting an interview with a player with a cell phone, and he got George Kittle in the background. His backside was exposed. Now, he posted the video to YouTube. He didn't know Kittle was exposed. The 49ers, they took it down. Well, they asked the guy to take it down. It was up there for like 20 minutes, maybe. And it was taken down. No harm, no foul. George Kittle was okay with it, not with his backside shown, but he was okay with that. It was a mistake. The union went crazy, and now here we are today with the union saying, hey, this is what we've been talking about. Our players are being exposed, are being embarrassed. George Kittle's wife is embarrassed. George Kittle's embarrassed. And I talked to the 49ers, they're like, where's this coming from? So that's where this thing is started up again. A lot of players don't know the policy. Players think that they're supposed to talk once a week. No. There's media access 4 days a week, and players are supposed to make themselves available 4 days a week. Now, there are only two players that are allowed an exemption, if you will. That's the starting quarterback, obviously, and one other player who gets a large media attention, like the star running back. Back in the day, Georgia would be Phil Simms and Lawrence Taylor. You know what I'm saying? Because those two players get a lot of media requests. So they would only be allowed to talk once a week, right? Everybody else, you gotta talk every day, basically. But the media does not need to talk to a player every day, right? So we usually give players that pass to say, okay, you could talk on Wednesday. Now, I cover the Cowboys. We only get 2 days of availability. That's Wednesday and Thursday. Friday, Mike McCarthy, the head coach of the Cowboys, has a thing called Stay Day, where they have like a light practice, and then they have their practice on Saturday, the day before the game. So what happens is we get McCarthy on a conference call on Friday, and if we want to play on Friday conference call, we could get it. But by that time, there's nothing to talk about on Friday. As you guys know, you guys have been beat writers. Friday is usually the day where you kind of get the game plan from the players. You kind of get those off-the-record conversations with them, trying to figure out what's going on, how you're attacking this, how you're attacking that, how you think they're going to attack you, those kind of things. That's what Friday's locker room has turned into. And usually you talk to the coach about the injuries on the record about who's going to be available on Sunday. But at least for the Cowboys' perspective, we don't have locker room access, but 31 other teams do. So as I said before, a lot of this is more about control, trying to bully the media, when really the players should be talking to the teams and the coaches, right? And every player is contractually obligated to talk to the media, right? So it's not us. This is a triangle. It's the players, the teams, and us. So we should all be trying to work together to get the job done. And look, I don't expect every player to like the media. And it's like I don't expect every media member to like the players, right? But we have a job to do. So respect our job. I respect the players. I have a lot of empathy for the players, considering how brutal the sport is, right? So we want to be able to, as George said, tell their story, have some empathy towards the players and those kinds of things. But the players want to have an adversarial relationship right now. And, we're not going to try to have an adversarial discussion with them. We're trying to have an open dialogue with them. And I do get it. As Lloyd Howe, who's the executive director of the NFLPA, said, we want you in our house, right? But we want you in our living room and our dining room. We don't want you in our bedroom. And that's how we feel like when you come into the locker room. And I understand that. And he's right. If I'm trying to sell something, I'm not going to your bedroom. I'm going to present it in the living room, and then we're going to sign the contract at the kitchen table because that's where I can put the paper at, right? That's what we're trying to do here. And it's worked for years. This policy's been in place for decades. But now all of a sudden the players have realized that they want to change it.
Calvin, and this is for you too, George. For someone who's watching that may say, well, what's the big deal? Can't they just wait outside until, after? Why do they need to get into the locker room? Explain why that is important, and explain, why it is, like how many good stories you've gotten out of actually being in the locker room.
Well, normally, here's the problem. It's a trust thing. Let's be honest here. If when you open up I'll give you a prime example. Anytime you open up the locker room during the week for the Cowboys, I can count 6 or 7 players who are leaving the locker room doing media access because they're going to lunch, right? So we need to get in the locker room to hold the players accountable so we can talk to them about the field of play, how they're playing, how their teams are playing, how their teammates are doing. Now, if the players kept their asses in the locker room during media availability, I could say, okay, I trust you. Close the locker room then, and we could all talk outside the locker room. But that is not the case, right? So we need the locker room. What they need to do, as I said, they need to talk to the teams, the coaches, and say, look, move the media access period to a certain part of the day, not when you got to go lift weights, not when you got to go to the cold tub. Move it toward the end of the day, after practice, after you have your meetings, and make it, and it is mandatory, but make sure all these guys are in the locker room for 45 minutes. And here's the reality. We really don't need a full 45 minutes.
Right.
We need about 20 minutes to get everything we need to get. But it's 45 minutes because players are dilly-dallying around. They're going to lunch, they're lifting weights, they're in the cold tub, they're talking to their girl, they're talking to each other, they're watching film and doing everything else but taking care of their media responsibilities. So that's why the locker room has to stay open to allow the media, and as George said earlier, to develop relationships with the players. And I'm sure George can attest to this, and even you, Matthew, covering boxing. If you have a good relationship with a player or a fighter and they lose or they're struggling, you have a lot more empathy towards that individual. And you could probably say, you know what, I'm not going to carve them up as bad as I would if we didn't have a relationship.
Yeah, and the other thing that why the the locker room is important to have access is because not all your stories are about the starting quarterback or the
Right.
star running back or what the coach has to say or your star receiver. Sometimes it's about a kid on the practice squad or maybe a kid playing his first NFL game or, something's going on in his life with his family that's noteworthy. And you might be the only reporter who actually knows that. So it's not something you want to bring a kid up to the podium and ask in front of everybody. You might want to just go by his locker and say, can you, do you have a couple of seconds? and ask him what you need to ask him and move on. And to have everything out in a designated area, I believe, is probably more of a problem for the players, because now they have to get up, put their clothes on, and go outside to wherever it is to do this interview, instead of just getting it done by their locker in about a minute or a minute and a half. So it's actually going to work against them if there's absolutely no access, because I know some reporters, they're going to put everybody on the media list just to make sure that they get covered what they need to get covered.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to. I mean, this only creates, a confrontation that's not even necessary, right? One of the best players in the league to talk to is Dak Prescott, right? He talks officially every Thursday, but sometimes on Wednesday he'll sit in his locker and have an off-the-record conversation with about 6 or 7 reporters. He's talking about anything. I remember, his girlfriend was pregnant. This was last year. And we were having one of these off-the-record conversations, but I'm going to tell you on the record here. And he was talking about, hey, the baby might be early. I said, why? Because I was a preemie. I said, really? He's like, yeah. So that was something that we got from Dak, talking about, his mom who's passed now, told him, hey, you were a preemie. And so one day when you have a baby, you might have conversations with Dak. It came out of an off-the-record talk. You know what I'm saying? And then when he had the baby, I remember I saw him at a charity event. So I said, is she early? And the baby was early because the baby had to go to ICU, right? So it was early. So it humanized Dak Prescott. He wasn't just a fantasy football, name or number. He was a human being. So those kinds of conversations can help the players and the media.
How rare is that for a superstar player to sit down and have that kind of a conversation with a handful of reporters anymore?
Terrell Owens used to do that every once in a while. Jason Witten did it sometimes. It's a rarity. Usually the non-star players, as George said, will have those off-the-record chats with you, because not a lot of people are talking to them, so they can kind of tell you what's really going on. I remember there was a fight in the Cowboys locker room. It was Chris Canty and Terrence Newman. They got into it, and it was like on a Friday. I happened to go in the locker room, and T.O. gave me a look like, look at the floor. And it was all these T-shirts and jerseys on the floor. And I was like, what? He goes, call me. I was like, uh-oh. And I called him. He dropped dime. Kenny and T-New got into a fight. But I called a backup safety, Patrick Watkins, and I said, hey, what happened with these two, right? And he said, oh, they were playing this game. You know how locker room guys are. They play these little games, and it got out of hand. I said, oh, okay, cool. So I was able to get everything I needed. I wrote a story about a locker room fight. But that's because we had good relationships with the players. Now, Tino didn't like the fact that we wrote about he got into a fight, and he, with Chris Canty, and those kinds of things. But we have a job to do. As I tell the players, I got to sell newspapers, right? So, so these positive relationships that we have generate copy.
Yeah. Speaking of that, like, what you've been, in the business a long time, how has the relationship between media and, NFL players changed over the last 20 years, if at all?
I would say there's a little bit of a wall, a barrier there. I would say when George was covering the beat, was on the beat, I would say, as George said, he had a lot of time in the locker room, so you can spend a lot of time with players. Now we don't spend as much time with them. They don't trust us as much. A lot of the younger players who come from the college game where there isn't open locker room access, and they are taught to not trust the media and that kind of thing. So that filters into or bleeds into when they get to the National Football League and that kind of thing. So the relationships are not as we're not as close to them as we used to be. It is interesting when I see former players now who I used to think wanted to kill me, they're hugging me now because of the relationships we built. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I thought you hated me. No, I always liked you. I couldn't tell because you're always yelling at me. nah, that's just business. It's just business. I was like, oh, okay. But that's part of the relationship you have with players and coaches. But today, they don't want that. They just look at us as, as the evil media. When really, I don't get up in the morning trying to write negative stories. I want to write the best story for that particular day.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to talk about the good old days, but in addition to that media, the practice access that we had basically was all day long. The players would be off on Tuesday, and they would go to make personal appearances, and we would go there. They wanted us to show up, whether they were the guest bartender or whatever they were doing. And so we spent a lot of time with there. I remember LT's bar was just down the road from where I lived back in the day. So I would go down there and get more stories at LT's sports bar than I would almost at the stadium. So that
A
was
little
just
secret.
a different era back then. And so now everything is really difficult to get exclusive stories because they sort of control access. They want to control the narrative, and it just makes it very difficult.
Calvin, I was telling George that I think the last time I saw you in person, I think I was covering UTEP football and you were covering SMU, and I think you went down to Mexico for literally crossed the bridge and came back, and then met me up for a beer.
Yeah, I've never been to Mexico before, and I had a rental car, so I drove to Juarez, I think, and I crossed the border. It was a big, I don't know, it's like this big circle or whatever. I was driving around and around. And then, me being a New Yorker, so I'm coming across back to United States. So they got the barrier there. And so I'm just parked, I'm just waiting for them to lift the thing. And I guess the Border Patrol, whatever, they're waiting for me to do something. I'm like, what do you want me to do? I'm in my car, lift the gate so I can get out of here. And he wants me to lift the trunk of the car to make sure I don't have anybody in there or something else. Yeah. I was like, oh, I didn't realize it. So I lifted the trunk, and then I was able to get back home.
Yeah, I should have forewarned you about that. They do that all the time, but
yeah, I didn't even realize it. I was like, what is he doing? What does he want? I mean, I got my license and everything. I mean, but I get it now.
Right. You've been at the Dallas Morning News for a long time, and I think we met. You were covering a lot of boxing at the time, and now hardly anybody covers boxing. But what do you remember about those early days when you were covering boxing? And do you have any favorite moments that stand out to you?
I remember covering boxing. All the fighters fought each other, right? I mean, and I guess I would say three of my best memories were when I covered Lennox Lewis's last fight when he beat Klitschko in LA at the Staples Center. And I would say one of the best promotions or best, I guess, salvaging a fight card I've ever seen was Don King salvaging the Hopkins Trinidad fight card after 9/11. And how, that was one of the first sporting events that occurred after 9/11. And I never forget in Madison Square Garden when that fight was in New York, the fans were booing Bernard Hopkins, right? Because as you know, New York is a predominantly a lot of fans from Puerto Rican descent. So everyone was rooting for Trinidad, who was from Puerto Rico. But by the time the night ended, there were chants of USA, USA, because Bernard Hopkins was winning the fight. So it was just the atmosphere, just how that whole thing came together. And I guess a third one was when De La Hoya fought Fernando Vargas. And I'd never seen Oscar so mad because he just beat the mess out of Fernando Vargas that fight in Vegas. I don't know if George was there. I don't know if you guys were both there. Yeah, but I ever remember Oscar he was just tearing him up. And I just don't ever remember Oscar just being that angry at a fighter. I don't know if you guys remember, but back in the day, we used to go to the fighters' suites like on Friday afternoon after the weigh-in. And I remember one time we went to Oscar's suite and he was holding like a little chihuahua, a dog. And I'm going, this is a prize fighter? I was like, Oscar's going to get killed. He's just soft, And because I was just like, surprised. You never see Mike Tyson hold a little dog. You know, he's got tigers, you know, running around. But his Oscar De La Hoya, who I kind of like, by the way. But those kind of memories you don't get today. It's like even the fighters today, they got you at arm's length. Like no one knows Bud Crawford, right? Like I like Canelo because he fights, but I don't think we really know Canelo. I think he's got a good personality, but I don't think people are close to him in the media.
Right. I mean, that's true. I mean, that's just the way it is nowadays. That fighters have their own platforms and social media. They don't really need to talk to the mainstream media that much anymore, and they try to control the narrative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really sad. Yeah, promoters too. Yeah, like you could always get Don King or Bob Arum on the phone and talk to them about something, or Gary Shaw. I think he's passed away now, right?
Right.
You can get Lou DiBella. I think he's still in the fight game, but but now I don't even know who half these guys are who are promoting these fights.
You can still get Arum on the phone, and he's 94 years old.
I need to call him, by the way, about a story I'm working on. But yeah, you can. That's good. I saw a Don King fight. It was on pay-per-view. It was I forgot who it was. Adrian Broner. Adrian Broner was fighting in Orlando. Adrian Broner was fighting in Orlando, Florida, and and Don King was promoting this fight, right? And it was crazy because it was like in a ballroom or something, and you know what I'm saying? So it's kind of crazy how Don King was still promoting fights, and he's doing with Adrian Broner, who just looked terrible in a fight that he lost to some guy. I can't even remember his name.
This was recently, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like 2-3 months ago. It was before training camp. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yes, I remember that. And wasn't it like Blair Cobbs?
He lost to Blair the Flair.
Yes,
that's who it was.
Blair the Flair beat him by unanimous decision. Yeah. At the Seminole Hotel and Casino right up the road in Hollywood, Florida.
George has all the beats.
George,
I was there.
You were there? I lost 2 hours of my life watching that whole fight card. And check this out, because you watch it on TV, the graphics were terrible. It's it was just I was like, dude, where's the graphics?
I remember the posters they were putting out were just looked like they'd been done by like a fourth grader. It was it was terrible.
Yeah, it's hanging on, but we'll see how Blair the Flair can capitalize off the big victory.
Oh, right. He's capitalizing all right.
Sure. I haven't heard from him since. So
no, we haven't. So.
My boy Broner, what's up, my boy Broner? Is he gonna fight again?
Let's hope not.
Yeah, I know. Don will probably drag him back out there somewhere.
Right.
Guy needs money. Brother needs money.
Yeah, I'm sure he does. Yeah. All right, Calvin, we appreciate having you on, taking some time out to discuss what's going on with the Pro Football Writers. Don't let them do it, man. Don't let them do it. Don't let them do it.
I got the good fight. Sorry about that little disruption there. I'm out here in the middle of the street. People walking around out here. Dallas is a dangerous city. Dangerous city. Gotta be careful.
It's all right. We're old Scribes. We're used to working under adverse conditions.
That's right.
We are. Yes,
right.
We are.
Absolutely.
Calvin, thanks a lot. It was really great seeing you again.
Same here, guys. Enjoy it. Take it easy.
Okay, we'll talk to you later.